permission, Tamara, I'll hand it to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike. And thanks again for everyone who has taken the time to join the session today. You're in the right place if you're here to learn more about the Part 2 application reopening in the approved vendor portal for the Illinois Shines or Illinois Adjustable Block Program. So I'm going to get started by introducing today's presenters. First, I'd like to introduce myself and others from the program administrator team. I'm Tamara Perry, Director of Solar and Storage Programs at Energy Solutions. We also have Keely Weiss from our operations team and James Marin from our information systems team, who will both provide support and information on the Part 2 application release. We're also very thankful to have Audrey Steinbach from the Illinois Power Agency with us today. Okay, so just a couple of housekeeping items. Everyone is going to be muted during the presentation. If you have any questions that you would like to ask during the webinar, please use the Q&A box. That will be the most helpful for our team to address as many questions as quickly as possible. We'll also have time at the end of the presentation to answer questions. As Mike mentioned, we'll have a video of this recording posted as well as the presentation slides. And we'll answer any questions that were not answered during the webinar today. Will be part of a webinar Q&A that will be posted on our website following the meeting. So a quick look at today's agenda. We will review our overall application process. We'll review the Part 2 application process. You'll be given a demonstration of how to submit a Part 2 application in the portal. And then we'll end and close with more information about support resources during the release, as well as other program updates. And then again, we'll answer with Q&A. We'll end with Q&A. Okay, so now let's move on to an overview of the application process. I'm going to hand it over to Keely, who will guide us through the process. Thank you, Keely.
Thanks, Tamara. Hi, everyone. My name is Keely. I'm on the operations team, as Tamara mentioned. So I'm just going to do a quick overview of the kind of end-to-end application process, which is probably a reminder for most folks, but just kind of wanted to review it as it relates to the Part 2 application. So the first step is the disclosure form. So the disclosure form is generated in the portal by the approved vendor or designee. And then once that form is signed by the customer, the Part 1 application can be submitted. So the Part 1 application information is, of course, entered into the portal and then submitted. And those projects must be submitted in a batch, and the application fees must be paid in Stripe prior to application review by the program administrator. Once those projects are verified, they go to the ICC in batches for review. So one kind of step in the beginning of this process is rebatching, which I just wanted to remind is a process that's happening over SharePoint, but we'll be moving that into the portal in the coming months. Upon approval of those batches by the ICC, the approved vendor must execute the REC contract or the product order within 7 business days of receiving the contract from the contracting utility, and then subsequently post collateral. Phase 5, the Part 2 submission is really what this webinar is focused on today. So after that project is developed, the Part 2 application can be submitted. Again, we'll review the application, and then once that gets verified, finally is the invoicing and payment phase. Move to the next slide, Mike. All right, just wanted to provide a quick update on the legacy Part 2 applications. So at this point, all of those applications that were submitted to the legacy portal have been reviewed and either been Part 2 verified or are in the need info status. So we've sent out need info emails on all of these projects. So if you haven't already responded, please respond to those and we'll be sure to get them processed. We're currently working through processing the responses that we have already received from everybody and are estimated to complete that all this week. And then just kind of one last note about these legacy applications. In the coming weeks, we will be working through kind of a need info cleanup project to kind of close out some of these older applications that have been in need info status for some time, just to kind of close the books on them and move forward. So stay tuned for more information and communication about that. Okay. So next we're going to really focus in on the part 2 application process. Of course, the first step is that application needs to be submitted. So this can't be done until the system is actually built and energized. So in the part 2 application, we're really looking for the entry or confirmation of the system information. So the system size, the number of modules, the capacity factor, all those details about the system itself. We also are looking for interconnection information, registry information, so that we can confirm that the project is correctly set up in GATS or MRETs, and that we can track the REC deliveries for that project. And we're also looking for installer information so that we can confirm their certification and status in the program. There are, of course, document uploads that are required. So we will be looking for a certificate of completion from the utility, as well as photos of the modules, inverters, and the meter, and proof that an irrevocable standing order has been initiated. I just want to mention these are kind of the more general requirements for all applications. Depending on the project type, there may be additional requirements, and the program guidebook goes into kind of some of the more details on some of those other requirements. So once that application is submitted, then the program administrator will review. And in this review phase, we're really making sure that the system was built as designed in part 1. So there are some changes that are allowed between part 1 and 2, and we're just looking to make sure that the system is within the program guidelines. If upon review, there's any additional information, updated document uploads that we need, or any clarifications, we'll send out a need info email for each application indicating what is needed. And we would like to request that approved vendors respond to those emails within 2 weeks so that we can continue moving applications through the program. And also just want to remind folks to check that junk folder just in case any of our emails end up in there, so that you don't miss anything. And then the next step would be we would part 2 verify the project. And when we do a part 2 verification, we'll send out an email for each system that gets verified, which will include the application ID, the project name, the date it was verified. And then we'll also post a Schedule B to your SharePoint folder for you to reference. Finally, as I mentioned before, after that part 2 verification, the project is eligible for invoicing. So the exact invoicing details really do vary based on the contract type and the system type. But generally, if projects are on the 2019 contract, those will invoice in either March, June, September, or December following the part 2 verification. And then for projects on the 2021 or 2022 contract, those will generally invoice the month after part 2 verification. So for example, if we part 2 verified something in December, it would be in the January invoice. Great. Next slide, please, Mike. Okay, so here our application processing team just put together a couple little helpful tips and reminders to help make sure that that application can get verified the first time through. These are just kind of some of the things we most frequently see that may result in a need info request. So if the property owner and the customer on the certificate of completion are different, then please enter a note describing what that relationship is in the comment section of the application, and that will help us be able to verify that document upload. For the photos of the modules, what we're looking for here, we need to actually be able to count them. So try not to cut off any modules in the photos. An aerial shot is going to be the best option. And if you can't get all of those photos, or all of the modules in one photo, then you can submit multiple photos. Just make sure that we can see the entire all of the modules so that we can do that review. And then finally, for the meter, make sure that if a screenshot is used, it comes from the meter portal and not the inverter portal. And if the application is an expansion to another system, make sure that you provide that proof of separate metering with the part 2 application if it hadn't already been provided in the part 1 application, as that's something that we need to be able to verify. Next slide, Mike. Okay, and I think this is my last bit of information for you today. So just wanted to kind of go over what the application processing schedule looks like for the remainder of 2022. So currently, part of our team is focused on reviewing the traditional community solar and community-driven community solar applications that were received. And due to the scoring element with these projects, they need to move through the program in groups, which is why we're really working on getting those reviews so that we can keep those moving. And we're expecting this kind of review and scoring phase to last into Q1 of 2023. While that's happening, we also have part of our team focused on processing distributed generation applications. So we'll have one group working on processing part 1 DG apps that were received in the new portal on or after September 1st. So we're going to begin processing these next week. So keep an eye out for any communications about that. And we'll also have part of the team focused on processing part 2 applications that are submitted to the new portal here beginning on December 15th. So generally we review applications in the order that they're received, and we will, have a continued focus on responding to and processing the responses to our need info emails as quickly as we can. All right, Mike, I think that is it for me. So I'm going to pass it over to James for a portal walkthrough.
Thank you, Keely. So let me share my screen. Hello, everybody. My name is James. I am from the IS department here at ES, and I'm part of the team that's building out the portal. And so if you can see my screen, Mike, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. Great. Okay, so here we go. So what you are looking at is the gateway to the part 2 application. So anybody who has entered a part 1 application in our portal already has probably already seen this screen. This is the project application screen, and you go to it by locating on the left side of your menu. And what we have done here is we've added a whole new section called the part 2 status. And you'll see this column right here called part 2 status. This is where, if you had an application that was submitted and that is ready for part 2, this is where you would see a status, and that letting you know that you can either enter it, edit it, or start it. And then we also added the batch status column right here to this screen, and a batch ID column right here as well. So this is going to be new in this new release. And so let's go into a part 2 application. So to do that, you would click this action button right here. And when you click this action button, it would take you to the next screen. You see? And this screen right here is sort of what we call the part 2 menu screen. And I'm going to zoom out so that you can see it all in one shot. But it's quite a long screen, and it has a lot of information in it, but it really is it's a catch-all screen where you can enter the sections up at the top. You can check off the attestations in the middle, and you can enter, let me zoom in again so I can show this. So right here, you can see the sections of the part 2 application. When you drill down into it, that would take you to that part of the application. When you complete it, you'll see that there's a green check mark right next to it showing you that that part has been completed. And when it's all completed, then you would come down to this section and check the boxes and check all the attestations that are required for the part 2 application. And there are quite a bit. And then down here at the bottom, you have this section to enter the differences from part 1 and part 2. So this is not a required field, but it's a field that is open to the AV to enter any information that they want to provide to the PA to describe what the differences are in part 1 and part 2. You also have comments here down at the bottom. This is not a required field, but it's another location or place where the AV can just enter any information that's relative to this application. Lastly, you have this last checkbox, the last attestation that you would check before you would enter your documents. And so there are required documents to the Part 2 application, and you would go to that screen by clicking this button right here. And then once you would finish updating or uploading your documents, all your required documents, then you would be able to submit your Part 2 application. But let's go back up and let's check out the sections. So let's start with section 1. This is section 1 of the Part 2 application. At the top, you have this visual representation that shows you what section you're in. Right below that, you have sort of like an option to describe if your Part 2 application still matches Part 1. And if it does, you just leave it as yes. Yes is sort of like the default field. And the form will automatically bring in all of your information from Part 1 and fill it in here. So you wouldn't have to do anything. You would just scroll down and you wouldn't have to touch the array section. You wouldn't have to provide different production details or go through the rec details again. You would just go straight down to the bottom, save and continue, and you would be finished. However, if there are differences, you would select no. And what would happen there is the same thing. The portal would fill in your information from Part 1. However, at this point, because there are differences, it allows you to edit. And that's where you can add arrays. If there's been an additional array added to the system, you can change the production details here. You can also run the rec calculation again right here. And something to note is if you select PV watts, you're going to see this field appear. And this field right here. But if you select custom capacity, you will not see that. You're going to see the custom capacity field appear. You're also going to have to describe, give an explanation of other capacity factor. And I think that's in line with what all the AVs are used to. And this is section 1. Let's move to section 2. This is section 2 of the Part 2 application. Again, you have the same visual representation of where you're at in the application process. You have the same dropdown where you can say that yes, the system is the same as Part 1, and it would again fill in all the details, your interconnection details. We also have system installer information down here. In some cases, this information may not be filled out. We have a button here where if you press it, it'll automatically fill in this section with the default approved vendor. It's sort of the same thing. If it's the same as Part 1, you would just select yes. If it's not, you would select no. The portal would fill in the detail, but you would have the ability to edit. So now let's go to section 2. Section 2 is a lot of the same features, except if you notice there is no drop down to fill in or to tell the system that this is the same, or your details have changed, because this is all new information. So this is all required. So as you scroll down, we have these fields that we have to enter: hours by race and hours by ethnicity. And something to note on this is that these aren't specific to this program. These questions are very similar to what are in the US Census. So it's kind of standardized questions here. And something else to note as well is whatever you enter in hours by race, the total for that also needs to total whatever you enter by hours by ethnicity. So in other words, you need to group these into either Hispanic or Latino or not Hispanic or Latino. And so there is a validation check that will make sure that these two sections sort of match. Below that, you have a section to enter zip codes of any employees who live in Illinois who have worked on this project. And the default is yes, and you would have the ability to add zip codes and add hours by zip code. Scrolling down, we have the job training program hour section. Sort of the same thing where you have this grid at the bottom. If you want to add a new program, you can, and then you would manually enter the hours for that program. I believe this is new for our part 2 of the application. And some of this information is still the same as the legacy. So again, save and continue would take you to the very next section, which is section 4. And we're back to having that visual representation of what section you're in. You have this drop down where you can say yes, the system still matches, or no. If you say yes, the portal will automatically fill in all of the information that's available in part 1. And there are some parts that will not be in part 1, so that even if you select yes, you'll still have to enter information. And that's here at the bottom, I believe. Let me scroll down. The community solar section where the NAV would have to describe what percentage of all small subscribers are a share of this total project capacity. This is new, and you would have to enter this, I believe. So let me go to the next section. So after this, you're sort of done with the sections of the application. So now we have to upload our documents. So to upload documents, we would go back to our menu page. We would scroll down, and we would hit this document button. And when we do that, it'll take us to the document page. This is where we need to, or the AV would enter all of the required documents and any additional documents that they just want to provide as well. So as you can see, we have listed all the required documentation that are that's required in part 2. And we give some indication that some of these you can upload multiple files, whereas like this certificate of completion of interconnection, if you upload a file and then you upload another file to the same section, it will replace the previous file. But any photos, we understand that an AV might have to upload several photos. They have the ability to do that. So scrolling down, these are some of the required documents that an AV would have to upload. And some of them are required conditionally. For example, this detailed battery schematic. If an AV selects yes, their system has a battery, then this will appear. If they select no, this will not. And there are several of those on this page as well. So yeah, this is the section where AVs upload documents. And something to note as well is at the very bottom, there is other documents upload. And this is where an AV would, if you have other documents that really aren't on this list, you can still upload that here. This is just another section to upload any document. Something to note is that the portal accepts PDF, JPEGs, and Word documents. And I believe we have a limit of a space limit of 100 megabytes per file. So let's go back to the main page. After an AV has entered all of their section information, they've gone down, check the boxes, check the attestation boxes, and uploaded their documents. Again, they can decide if they want to fill in differences in part 1 and part 2 and fill in the comment section. It's not required. But what is required is all the check boxes, all the attestations. And once you're done with that, you would press submit part 2 application. A lot of validation happens here. If there's any missing documents, you will get a pop-up. If there's a missing section, you would get a pop-up. And yeah, that is how you would, that's how an AV would submit part 2. So I'm going to give it back to Mike. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
All right, James, I'm going to share mine here. Thank you very much. And I believe you've got one more
slide
you're going to help us with. So let me just bring that up. Okay.
So I do want to emphasize that any application that was being processed offline previous to this, previous to ES, when we open up the part 2 application, that application will be available. Those applications will be available. And so in other words, if an application had a status that was not in step 1 and not withdrawn, they should be available for part 2. And then all applications that were in part 2 status and not verified, we should have those available for part 2. And that's it. Thank you.
Great, thank you, James. And I'm going to offer this slide to Keely, who may want to bookend James's nice presentation. Keely, do you want to add anything further to the overall process in light of James's presentation?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Just a reminder, as you know, as this relates to the entire application, or I'm sorry, as this relates to the part 2 application process, if you run into any issues with that kind of first stage of submitting the application here, please reach out to us and we'll be happy to support you. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, and Tamara, I think we're going to turn it back to you for our concluding section on support, next steps, and program updates. May I ask you to take over?
Yeah, great. And thank you to Keely and James for your presentations here. So now we're going to take a look at some of the resources that are available for approved vendors during this new release period. So we have a number of resources available for guidance for part 2 applications. We have a part 2 application portal guide, which is linked on this slide. It's available on our website as well. As I mentioned before, we'll have a recording of this webinar with the presentation slides and the Q&A available shortly after this meeting. In terms of office hours, we have a bunch of office hours next week and the week after to support AVs. We have our regularly scheduled office hours for December 14th and 21st from 10 to 11 Central. And then we have extended office hours on December 15th and 16th at various times during the day. As always, if you need immediate support, we are available via email as well. And next slide. Also wanted to just give a little bit of a snapshot of what's coming in addition to the part 2 application release, kind of as we close out 2022 and looking into the beginning of 2023. We will be sending out an email about REC estimate recalculations this week, so watch out for that. We have a CS disclosure form API working group scheduled for the week of the December 12th. We are preparing to release rebatching in the platform in Q1 2023. We also are preparing for the disclosure form API to be available in Q1, and we'll be starting a DG disclosure form API working group in Q1 as well. As Keely mentioned, we're continuing to go through need infos for TCS as well as other various applications. We're at the moment collecting consumer protection stakeholder feedback. And then coming up again next year in terms of stakeholder support and engagement, we are planning sector-specific AV forums as well as equity accountability system compliance training. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that all of this will be starting to populate in the calendar on our website, as well as in other communications, regular communications as well. Okay, we also wanted to take a chance to remind you that we have dedicated support resources for each sector that we call our sector strategists. We have the contact information listed for each sector here, and really encourage stakeholders to contact their appropriate sector strategists for support. Okay, so now I think we're going to move to the Q&A portion. I believe, let's see. We don't, and Mike, maybe you can jump in here. I don't think we have any open questions. Everything that's come in has been answered. Why don't we give another minute or two to see if there are other additional questions that people want to type into the Q&A box.
Yeah, thanks, Tamara. And I can share some of those questions just for review that have been posed thus far. And again, we invite your further questions. Will there be a choice not to answer option for race and ethnicity? Not having the option for people to opt out creates challenges. Yes, that option will be available. The agency has responded. What will the small subscriber amount be used for? How detailed will it need to be? For example, greater than 50%? Percentages fluctuate often. And the response is from the program administrator, the team, these does not need to be exact. An estimate is fine and acceptable. We'll do a full subscriber verification in conjunction with part 2 verification to determine the exact percentage. There's another question we've responded to. Will the net metering application approval letter be required or only conditionally required? And the response from the PA is net metering application approval letter is conditionally required. Got a couple more, and then I think these are coming in now. So let me take a look at our open questions.
I can answer the portal downtime.
Go ahead.
We are planning to put up a maintenance screen at some point the evening of December 14th. So next Thursday, there will be some downtime, and the portal will reopen the morning of December 15th with part 2. We just have to take the site down into maintenance to make those updates. And we'll be providing any other more information on that via the announcements as well.
Great. Thanks, Tamara. There's a question here I want to ask if the team is able to respond. Are there plans for a project status report, meaning exportable CSV in the portal? Is that something we can address?
Yeah, sure. I know that is definitely something that is on our list that we want more usable project status reports for AVs. And I just wanted to plug here as well, if there are any other suggestions that that any AV or stakeholder has regarding kind of the status reports or other reporting that would be useful for you, please feel free to email me and or the admin line and let us know.
Great, thank you. Have a question here. I want to ask the team if it can address it now. How quickly will the program respond to part 2 cures if they occur? And I want to make sure the team knows exactly what the inquiry is asking for. Is the team able to speak to that?
Keely, that might be a question that you're best equipped to answer.
Yeah, so we will be responding to those as quickly as we can. I think our goal will be to respond to those within 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you. Tomorrow, taking a look at some of our additional questions that are coming in. Did have a
Actually, sorry, Mike, I just want to correct myself. We'll respond to you, right away that we received your information, but we'll aim to process those within a couple of weeks.
Great, thank you. And there was a question about overall review time. I want to share the response from the agency and Audrey in that we will aim to review part 2 applications as swiftly and thoroughly as possible. That will be in part a function of how many part 2 applications we receive after opening and balancing that against traditional community solar and community-driven community solar and other part 1 applications currently in the review process. We are always aiming for the quickest turnaround time. Cannot offer specific time commitment until we determine the number of applications and the resulting review that creates more information for us. But thank you, good question. And we'll continue to provide information via our weekly announcements and other forums to keep the stakeholders apprised of that. Have a question here. I'm going to see if the program administrator team can answer. If a disclosure form is required to be updated and signed by a customer for part 2 verification, will the PA be able to generate a duplicate form for the designee, or would a new form need to be started from scratch? that something we can speak to?
Yeah, that's a good question, Mike. So right now we will need to have a new form generated in the portal by the approved vendor designee. And then we will just link that up with the application.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. I think we're caught up on questions. Now we will be publishing, as Tamara indicated, a comprehensive Q&A and can give full and fuller information in some areas with fuller detail. But we'll publish the question and answer soon following the webinar. We've got a few more moments if anybody has some questions. You know, this arena is familiar to many stakeholders, and through James's presentation, quite a straightforward walkthrough of the portal and the Part 2 process. Got another question that's come in. Thank you. Following up regarding the Section 3 installer demographics question, we are an approved vendor, but may work with an installer entity that's not in-house, and they may in turn have subs under them. Did the team see the initial question to which that clarification has been offered? I want to.
Yes, I did see the initial question. This
Thanks,
is
Audrey.
Audrey Steinbach. It would be really helpful if you could kind of type up this question and send it to the admin email, if possible. I want to be able to review the circumstance and make sure that I'm giving you a correct answer. So it'd be helpful if you could type up everything there, and then I can, you know, have someone to respond to, because this is coming in as anonymous as well.
Hey, Mike, I want to add
Yeah.
some clarification to Section 3 of the application.
Okay.
The way we designed it right now and the way it is, I don't believe that the demographic questions are required. So I may have misspoke when I was describing that.
Okay, thank you. And I think Audrey offered clarification on that as well in circumstances where that information may not be available. We have a question, and I think Audrey, you've addressed it in different ways in regard to review of the number of applications and continuing review of community solar in both categories, as well as Part 1. When will Part 2 applications need to be submitted in order to be included in the next quarter's invoices? And I think that's a function of the total volume. I don't know if you want to add any further information to that in terms of you know, expectations for stakeholders in the big picture in that regard. Is that anything you might want to add to?
Yeah, so I think both of the open questions right now are kind of related. We can't really offer an estimate of when all Part 2 applications upon submittal will be returned back or set into need info and finalized and verified by the program administrator, just because, you know, we don't know what we don't know right now in terms of the number of applications that we might get on the 15th. If we get one Part 2 application on the 15th, we can turn that around quite quickly, right? If we get 1,000, then it's different. So we can't really promise anything right now until we have a better picture, but we will be in communication once we do have that better picture on how things will pan out and what our plans are to balance against the other applications that we have in our queue right now that are waiting to be reviewed as well. In terms of invoicing, I believe Keely mentioned that if Part 2s are verified in December, they would be ready for the January invoicing period. But Keely, correct me if I'm wrong on that.
No, that's correct. So yeah, I think it's kind of related to also sort of like the volume that we get. But when a project invoices is really more related to when it gets verified as opposed to when it gets submitted.
And we'll continue to use those weekly announcements to stakeholders to share that information. So to Audrey's point and Keely's comment, we'll be in position to start to share the data that will then inform likely schedules so that AVs may be aware, understanding that the exact sequence will have a bearing as well. But we look forward to sharing that information as the applications are received. And I think we are fully caught up on Q&A. We invite your questions and answers at any juncture, and we share the information on contacting our team. I'll move backwards so that you can see that. on the slides here, either through a sector-specific email and our support strategists and team, or through the general admin@illinoisabp.com address, or the program administrator phone number for the program. So your questions are welcome at any time, but I think we're caught up. I want to thank everybody for joining today. I just want to ask our panelists if there's anything else they'd like to share, having responded to all the questions, or if that concludes today's presentation. So anything further that any of our panelists want to offer on this area or others?
One last thing I did just want to note, the demographic questions that are at the end of the Part 2 application are required, but there will be a declines to respond option offered. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear, and that's all.
Thank you. Important clarification, Audrey. So thank you there. All right. And from the program administrator, James, Keely, or Tamara, anything further before we sign off for this session?
No, I'm good.
Yeah, not for me. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much all.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. We'll get our recording